No singing. I'm like seriously, that would be this breakout, like your Golden Girls theme, if you happen to know that one.
Thank you for being a friend.
I don't know the next line.
I think it's like travel down the road and back again.
And back again. Yeah. No, that's yeah. Thank you. Yep. Okay. So I think we've that's the obligatory opening credits song right there. So, Ms. Maggie, how has your week been? All things good?
Yep, it's been good. Hey, Leslie.
Leslie, how are you doing this evening? So real quick, in the world of shameless self-promotion, obviously this is our Tuesday night, going live with Maggie and Babylon, and we talk about, where's my book? There it is. We talk about The Very Best Bad Idea. This week we're talking about Chapter 5, but I would feel at a loss if I didn't point out that my book, which the audiobook, is available on Amazon and Audible now. After months of kind of like bickering with Amazon, it finally went live this week. So you can buy the book on Amazon now. Well, it was always on Amazon. You can buy the Audible. You can buy the audiobook on Amazon now.
Okay, I was like, wait, the audiobook? Okay, real quick, because I see that Jen is here. I was waiting for Jen to show up.
Hello, Jen.
Jen bought me an amazing shirt, which I'm not going to describe it, but she bought me an amazing shirt for this podcast, which I am unable to wear today because something got spilled on it in the safe place that I put it for the podcast today.
I didn't need there to be a description until you specifically said there wouldn't be one, and now now I feel like there's that I'm missing something. Was it just like a t-shirt with writing on it and there's a surprise? Was it a particular slutty nature? Like, I'm curious. Like, I'm just what's that?
Yeah, it's not really a t-shirt, it's just pasties.
Damn it. Wait a minute. How do you spill something on like that actually makes more questions, not less.
So I guess everyone will have to tune in next week to see
I guess so. Next week I will be broadcasting from Houston, as I have a client taking me out there, so I will be in Houston from Sunday to Saturday of next week. We can still do it. I just won't be in my beautiful studio. I'll just be more laptop slumming in a Holiday Inn, but it's still gonna happen. So, yeah, now so Chapter 5 was one of my favorites to write. It's called Credit Misfiled. Sorry, Jen, I wanted just to say this real quick, throw this up there. The trick is they match my skin tone, not hers. That would gonna let that go. Okay. So right up front, Credit Misfiled was originally called All the Things Ford Didn't Do. And I wrote this big long chapter about Henry Ford and about how and all the things he didn't do and like all the things he's given credit for. And I wrote this like 3,000 word chapter about what a terrible person Henry Ford was, and all the credit he's given that he doesn't deserve. And I sent it off to my publishers, and they're like, Kirk, you have a witty, sarcastic, kind of snide and cynical kind of tone and texture through the whole book, and we love it. I was like, right? And they're like, but this chapter's just mean. I'm like, but it was true. They're like, no, we're not saying it was inaccurate. It was just scathing. It wasn't funny. It wasn't cynical. It wasn't sarcastic. It was just mean. I'm like, okay, that's fair. Let me try this again. So I went back and I had to rewrite the whole chapter about 7 different times. And finally, it got renamed to Credit Misfiled. And it's not just about Henry Ford, although he's in there. And it's far more about the things he did do, although highlighting all the things he didn't. Like, it's the things he didn't do are still absolutely talked about. But I spent a little bit more time explaining why he does deserve credit, just not the credit he's given. Leslie, I love this comment. Who doesn't get mean about Henry Ford? And the answer is anti-Semites. Anti-Semites don't get mad about Henry Ford. Everyone else, though. Real quick, last tangent in my own head before I stop talking. Probably not. Peter Davidson was talking on SNL's Weekly Report somewhat recently. And he was talking about how, like, cancel culture is getting out of hand. If you need to keep on doing things that include, like, if you don't, like, we don't have to watch Kevin Spacey movies anymore, but if you do, like, if you need to watch a movie with Kevin Spacey, you should, like, have to own that. He's like, for example, if you want to have like a Ford Mustang, you can, but every time you put on your seatbelt, you have to be like, and Ford hated the Jews. Like that's some you have to own it every time, which I thought was, I mean, he is a comedian, but it was an interesting observation.
I love how you said Peter Davidson, like Sir Peter Davidson. Pete.
Oh.
Pete.
Wow. I did do that. Well, I'm formalizing him. I'm sure that his birth certificate says Peter.
Mr. Peter James David Davidson. I don't know if those are his middle names. I'm just adding
what? I hope that when Peter Davidson tunes in, he goes like, damn it, that Mr. Westwood showed me some goddamn respect, and I appreciate that, because that's true. I love him. Anyway.
I love him too.
Sorry, real quick. I said it was never mind. That was going to be another tangent. I'm not going to let it happen.
Do it.
The worst joke I've ever heard in my entire life was by Pete Davidson. And to this day, thinking about it, like it was at the Justin Bieber roast.
Oh God.
And he was talking to Snoop Dogg.
Oh,
and
no.
he said, for those of you who don't know, I lost my dad on 9/11. But watching Snoop, but Snoop, Soul Plane might be the worst thing that's ever happened to me involving an airplane. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
not that bad. That's not that
bad. That's bleak. That's bleak. Come on, Maggie. No?
I mean, it's hilarious because it is.
It was just so, he was like, I lost my dad on 9/11, but Snoop, Soul Plane might be the worst thing that's ever happened to me involving an airplane. That's just rough. Anyway, so chapter 5, credit misfiled. Shoot from the hip, Maggie. How'd I do?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So of course I'm reading this and yet again, completely missed the point. Like I got the point, but I didn't care about the point. So like,
for those of you curious, this is why we're having this conversation with Maggie. Continue. Okay.
I zoomed right in about the stuff that interests me about it.
I'm about it.
So you said,
uh-huh,
on page 94.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, that's right. I'm taking notes.
Oh, I'm again. There's a lot of people I could talk about this book with, but I appreciate your just open, scathing hatred of me. Continue.
You said historic icons. Well, this is not a direct quote. This is from my notes. Historic icons didn't do the things we think they did, or at least in the way we think they did.
Yes, true.
So yes, and
are you saying that is a good thing?
Yes. Like this is actually something that drives me crazy about history. This is something that drives me absolutely insane about the way that we understand history, especially our heroes, like our real heroes.
Right.
And our villains as well.
Absolutely.
Because we do this, we grossly generalize whatever it was that happened, and we either give it to someone, or it's either an individual person or a group of people that
absolutely.
We do, right? Yeah. A broader sense in the way that we do this is that I know a lot of white supremacists, speaking of Henry Ford, but I know a lot of white supremacists and white nationalists feel that whites are the reason for all innovation.
Right.
You know, the reason we've progressed the way that we have is because of whites. How much of that is true and how much of that is just because of the way that we focus on them in history, right? The way that we've made whiteness this thing, right?
Right.
But we do that with Henry Ford. We do it with Thomas Edison. We do it with Thomas Jefferson.
Wow, that took us 8 minutes this week. For those of you keeping score, we can talk about Thomas Jefferson every episode, no matter how hard we have to reach to get there.
He's always relevant.
He's always relevant.
And so that's like one thing that really stood out to me, because I think it's just easier. It's just easier for us to
explain. I mean, that's the whole point of the chapter, is that it's easier. That's the entire point. So you can't say you missed the point or didn't care about the point. You just summarized it on page 2 of the chapter, rendering the chapter kind of pointless. Well, I spent the chapter proving that point.
And that's interesting, because I actually thought that I came to the point in my argument, because this is mostly an argument about about this. So I'm going with, this is what we do. We do it with the goodies. We do it with the baddies.
Absolutely.
We love to call white people colonizers, while we ignore the fact that every single culture, society, civilization have been colonizers.
And if you attempted to remove the empire okay, I'm going to go back and remove the empire from India so that England never took over India. Right. But they were under an empirical rule before that. Like every empire you peel back, you find another one underneath it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we constantly do this. Like we just constantly do this. And it's easier because it's like a better packaged history than to have to look at the context of why things were colonized, or to have to look at the context of who came up with what with Henry Ford or Thomas Edison or Thomas Jefferson, who came up with what, and the building blocks that came into this thing. It's just easier to say Henry Ford invented the automobile. Thomas Jefferson invented the light bulb. Like, it's just so much easier.
For the record, no one says that Jefferson invented the light bulb, but Edison.
Did I not say Edison? I'm sorry, Thomas Edison.
I thought I heard Jefferson, but then again, cool. I want to say that Christina Silva said this: it's binary thinking. Culturally, we tend to want to label people, races, countries, issues, etc. as right or wrong. It takes much less effort to just sort them into two piles instead of analyzing them. And again, if you read that comment, you don't need to read the entire chapter, because that's basically my point.
Okay. So then another aspect of my argument is where you quoted Henry Ford, or at least what's attributed to Henry Ford, which, by the way, I love this quote. First time hearing it. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse.
Right.
And the way that I read this was, he didn't innovate in the way that he did based on what the public asked him for. Rather, he did so based on what the public needed. Correct. And this reminded me of this random rant I went on with my husband's uncle, this poor man who had to listen to this, about why Amazon Prime Video was going to always suck. And the reason, I just jumped there. The reason being because Amazon Prime, when it first started, was all about this like revolutionary idea of asking for audience participation and what shows they decided to greenlight. So they would do like a premiere, they do the pilot season, and then they would ask people to vote. And I'm like, they will never get a Game of Thrones. They will never get an Orange is the New Black.
Because people are stupid.
Modern Family, because people are stupid. Exactly. So I did that whole thing. Anyway, so that with the going back to the whole how we like to pick a hero or pick a scapegoat and like to go with what? Yeah. The thing is about that is that there is no discernible pattern as to why we do that, who it is we pick when we pick them. People will say, well, white people would. No, but here's the thing. We do this on counterculture level too. Yep. We do this with revisionist history as well. Yep. We do this with all of our heroes, not just the culturally significant ones or the big ones, but also the counterculture, etc. Anyway, long story short, all of this goes down to what I thought the overall point of the chapter was, which is don't listen to people. They're dumb. I think I wrote, don't play with the crowd. They don't know what they want.
So, I mean, I absolutely talk about that. I had heard that quote by Ford 1,000 times, especially through business school, especially my early career. Like, if I'd asked people what they'd wanted, they'd have told me a faster horse. And in researching it, I found out that he in no way said that. He said nothing even similar to that. He said, like, at all. In fact, the first reference of that quote by him was in 1986. Like it was such revisionist history. Someone threw a platitude at him and gave it to him. But I still love the idea. I still love the quote. I have revised it and use it with my clients all the time. And I just say, like, hey, I can promise to give you what you need, but I can't promise to give you what you asked for. And they're like, but what I asked for is what I needed. I was like, statistically not likely. It's never happened. I've never had a client ask for what they needed. They asked for what they thought they needed. They were wrong. But my point, pardon me. The real point of this chapter is certainly that, but it's just, we love to distance ourselves from both good and bad. We could never be that bad and we could never be that good. Our failings in life are because I wish I was like that Michael Phelps, but he was just born with fish gills. I wish I could run like, Usain Bolt, but hey, there's physiological differences there. I wish I could this, I wish I could that, but we love to celebritize and enigmify. That's not a word, but we're going to go with it anyway. We love to push these things and we throw credit them. We lump whole teams worth of credit onto one person as a way of, and same thing in vilification. He was the devil. And we do that to separate ourselves from their morality, separate ourselves from their, the reason I haven't accomplished that is they're built differently. I mean, we've all saw that TikTok trend of the dude with the egg. He's just built different. Please tell me you got that joke.
Can we bring up Christina Silva's comment there?
That one?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So let me see. I typed this in a second ago, but now my brain is, woo. Okay, so that's actually not entirely true. So history textbooks are factual 99% of the time. The problem with history textbooks is they don't tell the whole story. That's the problem. It's not that they're coming out with complete infactual mythologies.
Well, it also depends on what grade we're talking. Third grade is lying.
Well, that's true.
If we're talking sub high school, they are lying. Period.
Middle school.
Well, I wouldn't. I would say that I lived in Massachusetts, and I've lived in Massachusetts, and the shit they say in the 8th grade textbooks is absolutely Yankee Doodle Dandy bullshit.
Can you give me an example?
The Battle of Bunker Hill. That didn't happen on Bunker Hill.
But that's what I'm saying. It's still called the Battle of Bunker Hill. It's always been called the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Right, but it doesn't teach the facts of it. It teaches the mythology of it. That's exactly my point. It teaches the cultural mythology, not the facts.
But to be fair, the Battle of Bunker Hill not being on Bunker Hill is kind of doesn't really matter. It's like a fun thing to bring up.
Sure. No, I mean there's more to it than that. Like the and this goes to what you're just about to say. Well, where you were saying is the Benedict Arnold was a dirty rotten traitor. Not even sort of true.
How is that not really true?
He betrayed one thing at the end of being a way better general than George Washington. Boy, am I going to catch heat for that.
But he was still a traitor. I mean,
sure.
I'm not saying that there wasn't context and all of this, important stuff, but he was still a traitor. Saying Benedict Arnold was a traitor is still a factual.
Absolutely. I'm saying that boiling his career down to that statement and only teaching that statement is a lie.
I disagree. It's not a lie. It's just not the whole truth.
Sure. And I mean, if that kind of thing could get away with cheating husbands, then we'd that doesn't work. We don't get to choose and pick. If the whole truth and nothing but the truth isn't the truth, then saying that, then reducing someone's life accomplishments to an afternoon indiscretion, you don't get them both ways. Either a person is the sum of all of their accomplishments, or they can actually be damned by a single act. If they can be damned by a single act, then we have a very different set of conversations to have.
People can be damned by a single act. Absolutely.
Sure. But so, I mean,
well, and here's the thing too, you're kind of muddling two different things here. One, you brought up the cheating husband, which is a relationship thing. And then you brought up a court of law with the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. Those are two very different frameworks, sure. Very different ways that we measure truth. But when it comes to textbooks, not just history, but science textbooks, a lot of times we oversimplify things based on the audience, based on whatever it is, and we build on it. That's kind of the point. But it's not a falsehood to say that Benedict Arnold was a traitor. You're right. When you get into higher grades, and if you care about American history, and if you care about Benedict Arnold, you learn more. I still would say Benedict Arnold was a traitor.
Absolutely. Would you say that Columbus discovered America?
Would I say that Columbus discovered America? Yes, I would say Columbus discovered America for Western Europe.
Interesting. But despite the fact he never landed here.
But to be fair, well, he landed in the Americas.
Sure, no, that's true.
When they say America, they don't just mean the United States. They mean the Americas. They mean
right. I mean, he didn't land in Mexico either. Just so we're clear on but
he did land in the Americas.
No, that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
And also, I'm pretty sure they don't actually use that wording anymore with Columbus.
Again, I didn't write the book for my third grader. I wrote the book for I didn't remember that I'm not writing this book for current elementary school students. I'm not that old. And that was what was being taught when I was in high school. So less than 20 years ago, that was still I've heard that narrative in the last 20 years.
Yeah. And so one of my issues with the Columbus discovered America thing and the fighting about it is a lot of times people try to say, well, it wasn't really Columbus, it was the Vikings. It wasn't really Columbus, it was the Chinese. And then people are like, how can you discover a place where people are already living?
Right.
So this is really what it comes down to. What we don't understand is how we talk about discovering.
Right.
The people who put, and this is a unpopular opinion, but the people who put the simplistic Columbus discovered America, the people who put that were using the term discover in the sense of he discovered it for
those people. Yeah.
These people, which is correct. Christopher Columbus did discover America. That is a correct statement. It is an incomplete statement.
Right, which is what my whole point that you're trying to disprove me on. That's the entire sentence that it says. It says they didn't do the thing they did, at least not the way it was described. Which is true.
I'm not trying to disprove you on that statement. I was responding to Christina about history.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's true. A lot of things that we read, like I said, I think I said 99% of what we read in history textbooks is true. It is, and I stand by that. It is true. It's just that there's so much more to it. And the problem is that no matter what we do, we will never have a complete history textbook, not just one.
It's not possible. Yeah.
No, it's not possible. Because we would, in order to, so for example, I'm taking history of Western civilization.
Sure.
In order to even begin speaking about Western civilization, they had to first talk about our evolution in Africa and moving into the Middle East. And there's just so many things that we would have to add contextually. Because even in speaking about Western civilization, we have to talk about the Silk Road and China. And we have to talk about, like it's just incredibly, there's so much. There's so much. We will never have a 100% accurate in the sense of complete history book.
Well, if you were to ask any child or even think to yourself of, why did I do X? Whatever X is, why did you go to this college versus that college? Why did you marry this person over that person? Whatever X is, why did you do X? There's literally never, ever a single answer. There's there's an aggregate. So we talk about George Washington. Oh, he won in this battle, or he did this thing, or he did that thing, or he did that. And we can attempt to boil down, this was the reasoning, but we will never know the thing that barmaid said to him in that time that really got him thinking, that changed the way he looked at this. We'll never know that because nobody wrote it down. Like, nobody was there except the two people, and neither of them wrote it down. Like, we will never, ever, ever have a complete picture. And so this is where this credit misfiled things come. We try so hard through the history of Western civilization. We come through and we try to make sense of it, and we make the villains, we distance them, and we build these little bubbles, these pocket people, these exemplars that are completely that are based in fiction, based in pure trope, and then we assign credit to them.
I wouldn't say they're necessarily based on fiction. I think that they're based in legend.
That is a better description. Descriptor.
So,
that's fair.
What Christina says, third, fourth comment up. I feel like it's like statistics, history. No, other one.
Oh, that one. Sorry.
Yeah. History is, yes, most of the time factual, but still manipulated to support the narrative of whatever agenda is prevalent at the time.
By damn PR people. Us PR people were evil.
And
I'm not even kidding.
Here's the thing too. We tend to blame history textbooks. We tend to blame whatever. But one of the things that I've noticed is people get upset about history textbooks having X but not having Y. And so their answer is to get rid of X and put in Y. Same problem.
Explain that a little bit. I'm sure I agree with you, but I'm not tracking.
So I'm sure I agree with you. So let's take the founding of America, for example. So
Thomas Jefferson did that by himself
completely. So we want to talk more about Indigenous Americans, rightfully so.
Sure.
But a lot of the suggestions are sort of pushing out the founding fathers, et cetera, because they're problematic, and just focusing on more Indigenous American history. That's the problem. That's not a complete history. That's a biased history. That's a dishonest history in the same sense of it being cherry picking as just having this. So we need to have like more of a combined effort, I guess you could say, because like it or not, this kind of goes back to the Christopher Columbus thing about discovering America. Like it or not, American history is generally speaking not exactly about the region itself,
Sure.
as much as it's about the formation of the United States of America.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, yes, 100%.
Like when we learn European history, when we're learning about the Brits, we have like a little preface about, the Celts and the whatever, but then we go straight into Alfred and we go straight into the Kings and there's nothing new here.
I thought of one. Battle of Bunker Hill was the first one that came to mind. Betsy Ross.
Betsy Ross and the American flag?
Right. Which did not happen in any at all. Betsy Ross had nothing to do with the American flag. Her great-grandchildren claimed that 100 years after her death. There's literally no archaeological, historical, or otherwise. That was something that her ancestors, her great-grandkids, found something in her attic and said, oh, my great-grandma made this for George Washington. This is the first American flag, with literally nothing to back it up. And that is taught in schools.
You're going to hate me.
You're wrong. So cool. Go for it.
To be fair, a lot of historical evidence is found that way.
Right. But there's none here. Like there's nothing to back it up. It's literally the claims of children, not journal entries. It's just, and in the words of, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Yeah, there's a lot of claims of things, but my grandfather was good friends with Thomas Jefferson. I can't back it up, but I swear that's not empirical evidence. And that doesn't go into history books. That goes into claims. But this is taught as history, and there's nothing to say it. Nope.
I sort of disagree. I want to point out real quick though that the Betsy Ross legend is taught a lot like Johnny Appleseed is taught.
Johnny Appleseed was a real person.
I'm aware, and so was Betsy Ross. But it's like it was taught.
But Johnny Appleseed. No, see, this is such a bad example on your part because there's tons of evidence of Johnny Appleseed and none of Betsy Ross.
I haven't finished my example.
Go ahead.
Okay. So yes, there is tons of evidence for Johnny Appleseed. However, what we learn of Johnny Appleseed is a legend in elementary school. We don't learn like the super facts about him. We learn that he literally, when I was in school, one of the reasons I thought Johnny Appleseed wasn't real was because I learned about him in the same unit that I learned about Babe and the Big Blue Ox. And that other dude. So he was as an American legend type. I wasn't learning about him with Thomas Jefferson and blah, blah, blah. I was learning about him with like the legends. But Betsy Ross was one of those legends. So once you get into middle school, high school, especially college, you don't hear about Betsy Ross. You don't hear about Johnny Appleseed really either. You don't hear about.
See, I'm from the DC area, and I heard about both of them, and I also heard about them together as fact. And one of them is, and I heard about in the 4th grade, I heard about John Chapman walking barefoot through Illinois and meeting Abraham Lincoln as a young child, and everything. I learned that in the 4th grade.
And another thing I learned was the cherry tree.
Well, yeah,
I learned that like around the same time.
And I will also say that my first introduction to the cherry tree was this is a famous lie. Like the whole joke, that was taught to me as untrue, which is interesting. But that's just a dichotomy in how things are. But the cherry tree and Betsy Ross equally true, which is to say, not at all. John Chapman existed.
And listen to me, because Christina and Jen are saying that they learned about it at the same time too. Like, this is what I'm saying. This is actually one of my gripes with the Bible. A lot of times when what we're learning in school, and a lot of times this is the fault of the student, but I'd say it's also the fault of the education program, how we're not making it clear.
Sure.
The difference between teaching legend and teaching absolute fact.
Agreed.
And that's like a big thing that I think people don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think that we need to make it more clear how we teach these things. But to be fair, we use legend and we even use myth to teach history into the college level about other cultures as well.
And for the record, I was just listening. I forgot his name. I was just listening to an organizational psychologist talking about the Myers-Briggs test. I swear this is relevant. I'm not going off my rocker. And he was talking about the Myers-Briggs test and about how it is absolute garbage and not based in fact at all. I mean, and they said, but please don't stop using it. Something doesn't need to be true to be useful.
Right.
Like if the Myers-Briggs helps you better as non-rooted in anything real, if it helps you better understand kind of your own outlook, if this fortune cookie gives you some purpose and gives you some direction, that's not a bad thing, as long as you're aware that don't let it hold you to anything, because it's not real. And the problem that we have in our system, like you're talking about, is that we teach it as fact and leave out the legend part.
Mm-hmm. Well, people see this a lot with like internet memes too. I think this is one of the reasons why people can't critically think about what they see on the internet. They see a meme that looks, like it's factual, and they take it as fact instead of looking into it.
Oh, no, absolutely. All I need to do, I'll tell you as a professional communicator, all I need to do is put a number and an asterisk on a sheet, and the asterisk could go down to the bottom, and the asterisk could say, not at all true, doesn't matter. There's a number with an asterisk next to it, people. He even cited his sources. Mm-hmm. My source was, I'm lying. People don't care. You cited your sources, you're good.
This is a big thing, especially when it comes to history. And, oh my gosh, the whole meme that was going around about how the modern white Jesus is based on Cesare Borgia, the gay lover of Leonardo da Vinci, which is completely not true and easily proved not true. And how many people still bring that up? They still argue that and think that it's factual.
I don't remember his name. I'm going to feel bad. I follow him on TikTok, and I'm sure you do as well. Like real life Indiana Jones, wears a fedora and has a beard. He's mid-30s something. He's an archaeologist. He's a literal archaeologist.
I know, but please give me his name when you find it.
Dang it. Now I've got to look this guy up. If someone if someone knows who I'm talking about, it's like Archeo Wolf. He looks like this.
Okay.
His name is Archeo Wolf. He's 36. He just said that. I've been wondering how old he is because he keeps talking about his age. And I was like, I wonder how old he's 2 years younger than me, apparently. But he's a real life archaeologist, and 100% of his content is golden. He's like made for you. Archeo Wolf, he's rad. My whole point is he talks about, like, he comes on, he's like, I hate pseudoscience so much. He comes on, he'll talk about the ancient aliens people, and he'll talk about, like, he comes in, he's like, oh my God, if I have to, one more pseudoscience bullshit. Like, Archeo Wolf. Thank you, Leslie. He is Jen Callie, Leslie Weplow, all like, no, Archeo Wolf is rad. I love him so much.
I've never heard of him, and I feel crazy now.
Oh no, like the minute I started, like the fact that you don't, he is so right up your alley. You're going to like devour his content, because other than being super historical and super facts-based, he's a very good speaker. And like us, he's a cynical asshole in a way that is remarkably approachable. So I love him so much. Archeo Wolf is rad. But like, it's all of the pseudoscience. He's like, oh gosh, like that is so not even close to true. Like, why are we talking about this? He works in a ghost town, Leslie? I don't know that I knew that.
This is, and
Archeo Wolf.
Pseudoscience for me is a little bit different because I'm not a scientist and it's not my special topic. I can just see logic fallacies and fails for a mile away.
Right.
And stuff like that. So I get a little like, but it's the historical ones that really get me.
Right. And when he talks, I mean, not to in any way diminish archaeology, but when he's talking about pseudoscience, he's not talking about chemistry or biology or physics. He's talking about the people, the ancient aliens people that are using like this writing on this thing clearly means there was aliens. Like, no, it doesn't. That's not.
Yeah, the leaps. Well, one of the things I can't stand, this is actually one thing that really freaking gets to me when we talk about history, and the ancient alien people do it. It's what their entire argument is based on, is that early humans or humans in the distant past of any sort were not intelligent enough to do XYZ. Therefore, there must have been an outer influence.
Absolutely. No, I mean, not absolutely. I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what people say. Like,
yeah.
Right.
Which is a false premise. Like, you have to do it based on that premise. And that premise is so easily disproved. Like, we were very intelligent, even when we were, grunting and living in caves. We were
absolutely.
So Oak Island. Oh my gosh!
I didn't know that he works at Oak Island. He lives in Oak Island.
Like Oak Island.
Like, that kind of ruins it for me, actually, if that's true. I mean, not like.
Well, Oak Island isn't a ghost town, though.
Yeah, I'm confused, Leslie.
I think she's saying Oak Island. I think she's giving an example of Oak Island, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Could it be? Is it possible? I love it.
I love how much I hate. That's my love-hate feelings for Oak Island. I love how much I hate Oak Island.
Yeah.
No, she's talking about Oak Island being the pseudoscience.
And Ancient Aliens are my husband and I watch those.
Yes, he's in Montana. That's what I thought.
Oh, okay. We make fun of them. By the way, Oak Island, I've been meaning to talk to you with Mormons and ex-Mormons because it's interesting to me. The parallels.
We will talk about that in another context. But I thought that he was in Montana. No, he's great. You'll love him, Maggie. Yeah, Archeo Wolf, he's great. But yes, the Ancient Aliens and the thing that I've been seeing more and more of, and I used to do it too, and it kind of got pointed out to me about 2 years ago, and I started noticing it more and more. And this is really pervasive. And this feels like I've gone a little bit off topic here, but it really does fall into this. And that is the true cancerous insidiousness of the false dichotomy. And the worst part about the false dichotomy is that people that do it, they are not using it as lots of fallacies like the straw man attack or the ad hominem attack. That is used maliciously because you're trying to win. Whereas the false dichotomy is used in earnest. It's used genuinely. It's like, well, so what are you saying? You are either saying X or Y. It can only be one of those two things. And I have found more and more that the person doing that, they're not using it as a rhetorical thing. They're using it because they genuinely see it.
I understand. Yeah.
They are literally saying, oh no, this is look, either X or Y. You're like, that's not even close to the only two options.
Oh my gosh.
And we, he was either the son of God or crazy as a hard-boiled egg. You're like, no, there are other options on the table.
Yep.
Like there are other options on the table. The false dichotomy is so dangerous because it is so logical, so fast. You're like, oh my gosh, it does have to be one of those two things. No, it doesn't. And the person using it isn't using it to be malicious. They're using it because they also have bifurcated their own mentality on the issue and got rid of all nuance and gray, which is why we end up giving so much credit and so much victim/villainhood to people that were sort of around, but not necessarily the driving force. Or they were the driving force and that's it. They just had the idea and everyone this false dichotomy mentality is where we kind of fall into this trick and this trap.
Well, and it's interesting trying to explain it because I've actually encountered this past week on my TikTok about the subject of God. And a lot of people have been saying, well, God is either this or this. So which is it? And I'm like, neither. And they're like, no, he has to be this or this. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. But the thing is these people, I don't view them as coming at me. I don't view them as attacking me. They literally cannot understand that there could be another option.
Right.
And I get that because when you talk about things like God, which are so abstract, let's just be honest, completely abstract,
right?
It's really difficult to see these things. But my biggest problem with the false dichotomy is not necessarily how it judges a situation or the topic, but how it judges the person who they are saying, but it's either this or that too, if that makes sense, because they're making the assumption that person either believes this or that, or is lying to themselves, or is being intellectually dishonest. And therefore the conversation sort of shuts down there because they can't trust anything else that person is saying. They refuse to see that. And again, when I say refuse, I'm not saying out of a mean thing.
Right.
They just really can't see. So it becomes this, you're crazy.
No, and it's really interesting. I was having a conversation the other day with an individual, and I don't know how to explain this without it sounding strangely self-congratulatory, and I don't mean it like that, but they were telling me something that I had never thought of before. I was like, interesting. That's fascinating. I'd never that is a completely different way of, and it was completely altering. It was like someone had pulled the rug out from under me. I was like, holy crap, this completely changes the structure of how I'd understood this. But when it got turned around and I was explaining, they're like, nope, that's not how it is. I'm like, wait a minute. It's an interesting thing of people get really, really oddly defensive against things that'll alter the parameters of not an argument, but the parameters of the structure the mentality that the argument is based on. If you, instead of attacking the argument, if you start moving the room around, like, well, that the door isn't over there, the window's over there, and you start moving the room, all of a sudden that pretty little false dichotomy you've set up falls apart because it doesn't have the room, it doesn't have the structure to move on anymore. And we get so tied up in, this is the way the room looks, this is the way the architecture works, and so this is the dichotomy. It is either this or this. You're like, right, that would be true if the room looked anything like that, but really it doesn't. And it's completely, you've set up a false environment that will support this. Stop worrying about the dichotomy. Look at the environment you've built. It doesn't work anymore. And we have to be remarkably aware of our own perception of where we're arguing from, because so often these false dichotomies are defensive mechanisms. Defensive mechanisms. That's really hard to say. From our own self to defend the architecture of our perspective, which isn't based on anything but our experience, not facts.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Yeah, I heard. I have heard Jesus was either the Son of God or he was lying. No, I had a Sunday school teacher, a pastor actually. I had he was my mission president, for those of you who are Mormon or ex-Mormon, who said literally he did this whole thing, and he said, look, Jesus was either the divine Son of God or a mental patient. He was either as crazy as a man who thought he was a hard-boiled egg, or was the immaculately conceived Son of God. And at 19 years old, I was like, give me some Kool-Aid, brother. Like, and now I look back and I was like, that's the most moronic thing. There's so many options that aren't those two.
Yeah, my biggest beef right now, and this is where it gets hard for me. Because a lot of times when an argument or a discussion veers off into a certain thing, it's like, I don't even want to talk about the topic. I want to talk about where this argument is going. Like the argument.
I love it. Yeah.
Like the discussion itself. And so that's how I feel when I watch atheists and Christians argue about the historicity of Jesus.
Can I just pause? How much I love the word historicity. The historicity. I love that word. Not hostomate that. Like, anyway, but continue. I agree. And not just where's it going, but where's it coming from? It's like, let's not have the argument we're having. Let's argue about the playing field. Like, we're agreeing. Let's not worry about whether we're playing football or rugby. Let's agree what the field looks like, because that's important to the conversation.
So it's interesting because Christians are invested in proving the historic Jesus because they think that proving the historic Jesus proves the
something else,
logical side of Jesus. Like it proves that he's the Son of God. It proves the resurrection, which is
if he existed, clearly he was everything he said he was.
Right. And then atheists kind of get, and I'm using very general terms here, by the way, just obviously not all atheists, obviously not all Christians, but then atheists get all, no, he didn't exist at all. So it becomes this whole like, no, there's no evidence. There's no blah, 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 that he existed, yada, yada, yada. He's absolute myth from A to Z. Boom.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys, this is a dumb argument.
Yeah.
Dumbest of arguments. Like it really, whatever. It just drives me crazy. It's like, why are we even bickering over this? This just doesn't.
No. And it's, I did a piece of content on my main account of TikTok this week, and it goes to the purpose of all conversation, the purpose of all communication. It's like, who are you talking to and what do they want? What do you want them to do? If an atheist and a Christian are both talking and they're both aiming at converting the other one, the purpose of that is clear. The audience is clear. And whether or not that they're going to be effective, I don't care. If that's each of their goal, hit each other with foam bats all day long, I'm fine with it. Like, but often they'll both claim that that's not their goal. They're like, no, I'm not here to convert anyone, but like, okay, cool. Then let's agree up front. What's the goal? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, if you're not trying to convince me there is a God, or inversely that there isn't one, what in fact are we talking about? Because if that's not the goal, like if that's the goal, no, thank you. If that isn't the goal, let me understand your goal so I can better put myself in let me not get defensive and think you're coming after, like trying to drag me into a font somewhere. Like, let me put myself into the headspace you want me if it's not to convert me. If it is to convert me, how about we just not talk about it?
Right.
Bringing it back around to this credit thing, like none of this has been way far afield, but it's this interesting thing that we do of we take scraps of credit scraps of fact, and use a fact to prove a completely unrelated or adjacent thing and say, well, look, this man existed in Israel 2,000 years ago. And because he existed, clearly everything else he said is true. Mm-hmm. Like that's an interesting, imagine if 2,000 years ago, we would say that about Donald Trump. Hey, we proved he existed. Everything he said must have been true.
Well, and not only that, everything that everyone else said about him must have been true.
Right. Hey, we've proved he existed, so everything said must be accurate. What's so crazy to me is we look at historical documents with a little bit more, I'm trying to say sacredness, more deference. We look at historical documents with more deference than we do our own newspapers. They're the same thing. They're opinions written down. If you can look on the front page of the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, if you can look in one of these papers and go, that is bullshit. Why are we looking at historical documents and saying, but this was written by the hand of God? Like, go for it. Go for it.
Well, there's such a thing as primary and secondary sources. Like, okay.
Doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with what I just said.
No, what I'm saying is you're saying that historical documents are the same thing as a newspaper. They're just opinion. That's not entirely true.
It is absolutely true.
It's not entirely true. It can't.
So a modern textbook is just as flawed as an ancient textbook.
Wait. Now we're talking about textbooks.
I'm saying. So you didn't like that I was comparing an ancient historical document to a newspaper. So I changed it to a textbook. They're both flawed and subjective.
But they're two different things. An ancient document is not akin to a textbook or a newspaper clipping unless
whatever you would makes you feel the most comfortable, then let's use that one. Just because someone
trying to understand what you're saying. Like
a flawed human being wrote down something they thought or observed a long time ago in no way is different than a flawed human being writing down something they thought or observed now in any context that would make sense. Someone 2,000 years ago going, I saw a man, he was the son of God. I saw a man, he walked on water. No matter what they wrote is the exact same as someone writing. And now I'm not even arguing the fiction versus nonfiction thing. I'm saying that I can find people devoutly protesting facts today that are garbage. And we somehow think that because someone wrote it a long time ago, that makes it true. Go for it.
Well, there's a few flaws in your logic here.
Oh, I'm sure.
You're equating all historical documents with opinion pieces, basically.
I am absolutely not. I took that out. I'm saying that someone writing down a white paper, the number of garbage white papers I read in any given week is a lot. Written by people from MIT, the number of scientific readings my point is that the author of everything ever written was a person and should be taken as such. That's my whole point. Okay. They had opinions. They were right. They were wrong. They had fallacies. They had dichotomies. Anything written down, unless we find something written actually by an ape, everything authored in the history of mankind was written by mankind and therefore is equally BS and equally true and needs to be weighed as such. It needs to be looked at with something 2,000 years old needs to be looked at with every bit of skepticism as the Wall Street Journal, because here's the fun part. The Wall Street Journal, we can say this is in the op-ed section. The 2,000-year-old document, we have no freaking clue. We do not know if it was an opinion. We do not know if it was a story. We do not know. We have to rely on the provenience of the context of it to guide us to believe what it was. We don't have more than that. I think I've lost you.
Well, yeah, because you're kind of jumping around. So first of all, your second part is correct. I mean, obviously, when you say everything written down is written by a flawed human, et cetera, like you're mostly correct, but not all things written down are the same thing.
I would agree with that.
Not all things written down are opinion pieces or reporting on something. through the lens of opinion or whatever, like
So I would agree with that. My point is that the things written down today, we in modern context know what they are. And in ancient context, we have no clue. We can guess.
Not necessarily. So
yes, necessarily, but I'm dying to hear you try to walk your way out of that.
The reason why I'm saying not necessarily is because even today, as you just said, as we were just talking about, things written down, knowing their context is absolutely not true. I mean, we were just talking about. I'm saying that things written down and knowing their context is absolutely not true for modern time, because we were just talking about this with memes. If you make it look fancy enough on a meme, people will believe it. If you write, and do you know how many times I've seen people use op-eds as proof of something?
Oh, absolutely. Every day.
It says op-ed at the top, and people will use it as if it's an actual genuine report of something, when it's not. It's an op-ed. There's a difference. People don't understand context presently.
Right. You're proving my point right now. I'm dying to figure out how you're going to prove yours with that information.
Two, there is also the issue with a few different things. You're assuming that people trust ancient documents more than they trust modern. That's absolutely.
I am not assuming anything. I can show. I'm not saying that scientists do. I'm saying that the people at large, absolutely, and I can show you this. I can back up. People absolutely. When we found the Nag Hammadi, what's that?
What Hugh said. Hugh just said it. You're lumping things in together, and it just doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like saying
he's proving my point.
I don't trust anything that's ever been written because it's all written by failed humans. Look at Harry Potter. That's not real. No one said it was fiction. Like I guess I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Like that's why I was wondering why you chose to use historical documents versus a newspaper. I think that's what I was hung up on.
So stop. So okay.
You switched to textbooks, which made no sense. Like
stop.
Okay.
You are applying the modern context with the lack of context. My thing is that we do not know what the Nag Hammadi documents were. We found scrolls in a clay pot and we say, this is what they are. These are the Dead Sea Scrolls. They are XYZ. Okay, cool. We can make some very educated guesses, but guess what the second word there is? Guesses. In my lifetime, Egyptologists have changed several different perspectives on their understanding of what different eras and writings were or weren't, or what different. There has been developmental thought in my lifetime of 38 years of what happened 3,000 years ago, because we have new understandings and new contexts. I am just saying you're getting hung up on the fact that I used a newspaper or a textbook and saying it made no sense only because I chose contexts. Let's take all context out. My point is that these old documents, we very rarely have accurate context for them. When you look at a cave painting, we have no clue what that is. We don't know if it was a narrative. We don't know if it was a historical document. We don't know if that was a kid telling a story from his dream. We don't know if that's someone saying that the hunt that him and his dad went on. We don't know. We can assume. We have lots of good guesses. We have lots of good knowledge. And I wanted to go back to this one of saying, it's very nihilistic. LOL, is there no truth? There's tons of truth. There's lots of truth. I'm saying that all of it comes from an understanding of our perspective. And we have to be willing to change our perspective. And where all of this gets in trouble is when we start saying my perspective is right and the way that I read that wall is true, and someone else's perspective of that wall is wrong. And that's wrong.
Okay, so I'm going to, first of all, what Hugh said here, Kirk, your point is coming across as generalizations. Absolutely. I want to make a few really key points here. One, you didn't compare a newspaper to a textbook. You compared it to ancient texts. And I'm not sure if you meant textbook or ancient text, but those are two very different things.
No, I compared ancient texts to both. I made a triangle. I said, pick your modern context. Pick one. My point has not changed in all of this. Ancient texts, one of the things we are always missing is proper context. Often we have really good context. Often we don't. Sometimes we know exactly what something is, but like the Dead Sea Scrolls are one of my favorites. They were found in the 1940s, 30s. I don't remember. I used to know the year in Nag Hammadi. They were in a clay pot. They were found by a shepherd. But the context of them There's lots, but that has been developing just over the last 50, 60 years. That's new context. That's new information that changed a lot of what we understood from before it. I was comparing ancient, so before the Nag Hammadi, before the Dead Sea Scrolls, we had this much information and they added context and it shifted a lot of people's views. A lot of people say it shifted it negatively. A lot of people said it changed the perspective. My whole point in all of this is whether we're talking the Washington Post or Harry Potter or textbooks or whatever, a lot of the ancient documents we have, and yes, I'm talking in generalizations because I can't speak in specifics, that we can't in this conversation. I'm saying that we don't have the contexts of a lot of ancient texts. We don't have reliable contexts.
So this is where you're getting it wrong, though, is
Okay.
you're basing it on a false premise.
Okay, I believe you. What's the premise?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, I think what you're trying to say, I think what you were trying to say is pretty clear. You're trying to say that we're all human and it goes through the human lens and therefore we're flawed, right?
Yes, that's the general point. Yeah.
But the problem with the generalization that you made was that it generalized the documents themselves. Do you see what I'm saying here?
So what is sacred about these documents that is offending? Why does it bother you that I'm saying that these documents were written by people and they can't be trusted as if they were fact?
Now that's an interesting dichotomy that you just made.
No, because I brought it up and you've been very, very triggered that I've been attacking the context of these documents.
Absolutely not. I'm not triggered at all. I'm very confused as to what you're saying. I'm still kind of confused as to what you're saying because you're going off of the premise that the documents are X. The documents aren't necessarily X, and we don't necessarily use the documents to prove Y or to need context for this or that. There's a bunch of—
I'm not saying that.
Right, but you kind of are in your comparison with them to other things. So that's where I was confused and looking for like what
I've offered to change it to whatever you would like. It doesn't matter. I'm not comparing. I'm saying that ancient documents, the context doesn't matter. A, because we don't have it, and B, because at the end of the day, they are going to be flawed. They're written by people. There's absolutely truth in the world. I'm not being nihilist. I'm just saying that everything written down is incomplete and from one person's perspective. And even if they had a perfect photographic representation of that historical document, and it was still only one perspective of it. And in modern times, now let's go to police reports, just to throw even more. In multiple accounts of the same event, in modern times can't be trusted. So why do we trust so much ancient reports? And we do. And that's okay. You don't. There are many people that do.
Well, of course. I mean,
so you say we don't. That's not fair.
There's many people who believe that the earth is flat. I mean, what do you want?
I've never met one. I was about to say, for as far as I can tell, that's more of an internet trope than anything. But my point is that there are people there, and I hate speaking in the passive voices, especially in this, because that's where it comes off as generalization and clickbaity. But there are absolutely educational groups of people that take historical documents and historical accounts as scripture.
In what sense? Give me an example.
Pick one.
Give me an example.
The entire Tudor dynasty.
Okay, but like, give me an example of a document that they're treating as absolute truth.
I mean, everything from the journals of Anne Boleyn to the journals of Henry VIII, to the number of documentaries and things I've read about, well, this person said this and this person, and we treat these things as though they weren't flawed.
No, documentaries do, not historians.
I said many things. I've watched documentaries, to read histories, I've done lots of studies on all of this, to writing this book. I did over 140 some odd interviews of people.
And see, this is, I think, where you're confusing the point.
Okay.
Like, historians piece together a puzzle using things like documents, but also archaeology and whatever. But what you're reading are mostly pop things like documentaries or historic books. Alison Weir wrote a really great book called The Six Wives of Henry VIII. But let's be honest about that real quick. Alison Weir and the documentaries on the BBC and everything like that are infotainment.
Absolutely.
They're meant to not really give you nuance. They're meant to paint a picture. They're meant to share a story.
I actually cover this in the book. Yeah.
You're going off of the false premise that this is how historians operate, and it's not.
And again, you're making the assumption there. I'm not.
Well, I'm not.
You just told me what I'm doing, which isn't true, but continue.
I mean, did you not just say I was triggered? Did you not just say that I was treating these things as sacred? I'm not.
No,
I'm over here as someone who's studying history right now, studying histology right now. And that word. That is not actually how it works, is what I'm trying to say to you. I'm saying that you're going off of a false premise here. You're going off of this idea that we find this sheet of paper, we read it, and we're like, this is what this means. That's actually not what historians do at all. Not only that, but historic documents are not necessarily just opinion pieces, or rather just the Dear Diary, this is what happened today. Historic documents also include birth certificates. They include the contents of a ship. They include a whole bunch of different things. And they're not just used for what they say. They're also used for where they're found. They're also used for what they were found in, for what they were written with, for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I'm saying. You have a very generalized and oversimplified view of the way that historians operate. And based on generalized misunderstanding of the way that historians actually collect history, you are making assumptions about how people feel about historic documents, and you're wrong. You're completely wrong. Not only are you about the way that historians do it, but you're wrong about the way that people absorb it, the way that people believe it.
Okay, now you're wrong.
Most people.
You had me to that point. Okay.
Let me finish my thought. Most people don't actually view these ancient records as being better or more sacred, as you put it, than other records. I mean, if we're talking religious records, that's a whole other thing. But that's not actually
which we were, for the record, which we absolutely were.
So the general public, they generally actually don't think that. They tend to be more of I need to feel it. I don't care what some guy said about another guy. History isn't really valued in our culture, in our society, and it hasn't been for a very long time. So this flippancy about how people view it as sacred is nonsense. I understand that you're using.
You're doing the same thing to me. What you're saying that I'm doing, though. You're using your perspective and saying that that's not how people are. And I'm saying, but I'm saying it. So your perspective is that there isn't. And my perspective is that it's, I see what you're saying. I do. I'm not, you're talking about academics and I'm talking about the public.
Right. And I'm talking about both. And I guess my question for you, Kirk, is why you think that you know more about this?
I don't think that I know more about this. I know more about cognition, and that's all I'm talking about. I'm saying that
I understand that you know more about cognition, but you don't understand, you haven't actually come up against or studied the way that the public views history and the problems in history, right? In the academic level of history, or in the way that we understand history, or the way that we talk about history. These are all very different things. And just for the record, I just want to say, just for the record, in your original, what you were saying in your comparison of historical documents and newspapers, my confusion was 100% on that connection that you made. It wasn't even about the argument you were trying to make. It was
which is why I kept trying to remove it. I kept saying, okay, never mind. If that's the problem,
trying to remove it and replace it with equally flawed one. So I was very confused as to what the point is you were trying to make. I think the point is you were trying to make was that everything that humans write down is flawed, which is okay, but that's kind of besides the point.
That is the point. People who were saying that's the only point I've in all of this, with all of the Kirk, your flawed premise and everything else. That's truly the only point I've been trying to make. The whole point of Crit Misfiled, the whole point of this chapter, the whole point of this whole section is that that as long as the author of it was a person with their perspective, we have to take that with that amount of credibility. That's the entire point.
Right. And I guess what I'm just not understanding. Is where you think that those are even the same thing, in that regard, even because they're not. How many people actually read primary documents, historical documents?
me. I usually will try to go out of my way to find, if I'm researching something, I will try to find the thing that they are referencing.
But just like with I've never met a flat earther thing, like that's very anecdotal. I'm talking like,
I understand. No, that's a valid point. That's a valid point that most people read the report on, not the primary document, which is, for the record, often can be a contributor, because now we're twofold deep. Now this person said it, so we're not even reading the original document. We're reading this person's
take
perception. On it. So now and again, this goes back to history, the history 001. I go and take a history class, and my history professor tells me what they heard from their history professor, who was actually on the day and read it and wrote it and believed it. So now my opinion, my belief is third hand, is second hand, is fourth hand, and that's fine. I'm not actually down on that. I believe we have to learn from teachers and mentors, and no one can learn everything firsthand, primary resources. It's not possible. I'm just saying that we have to accept, my point hasn't changed. We have to accept that everything from the original document to the original perception of it to the second person who kind of, from Jung to Freud to from down the line, these are human perceptions, and they are apt to be wrong. Just like we are often told we are wrong when we weren't. Someone else misunderstood things we were saying. And I'm not even talking about this conversation. Like, the whole premise of the book, the whole introduction is about how often people shoot you down so fast before you have an opportunity to make what you're trying to say clear, that they get to believe in their superiority. You get to say, okay, cool, I won't think or talk anymore because and nothing progresses because people stop there. You listen to, and this is where these people get elevated with credit, and these people get elevated with villainy. That's a word. And it comes from these perceptions being repeated and becoming an echo chamber, and the nuance is lost. And it's a really good example of that.
Like, your perception of history is a very, very, very common one. And that's one of the reasons why people are so distrusting of history, because this idea of the way that history is formulated and put into textbooks, etc.
And again, my perception of history, for the most part, was born of talking to historians and philosophers and people. Mine wasn't mine. I called people. I got on the phone with PhDs all over and again, I even just appealed to authority by saying they had a really pretty degree. My perception here, I double checked. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm not even close to saying it's correct. I'm saying that it's mine and it's born of research.
Which perception are you talking about? Like,
the perception you said was wrong like 17 times. My perception of history.
No, but which one? Because that's a very general perception of history. Like, what
you just said, you said your perception of history, and so I'm responding to that.
You double checked. I'm confused again. So you're
saying
everything
I said in this book. Everything I said in this book, I called someone smarter than me to double check.
No, but I'm not talking about what happened in the book. I'm talking about this conversation. This
conversation is all written in the book. Like, every assertion I'm making, I made in this chapter. Every assertion I'm making, I made in this chapter.
I guess it just goes back to what Hugh perfectly said about how you're generalizing, or it comes across as you're generalizing. That was really, I think, the crux of it for me, because I was more like, which historic document are you talking about? That's where I was confused. And then
absolutely.
Calling it a textbook didn't make any sense, because historic documents are not textbooks. So it was just incredible.
Again, and I would ask you just generalized back, but when you did it, it wasn't bad. Because yes, some historical documents are textbooks. So
well, actually, they're not. That would be a tertiary source, I believe. I was talking about primary sources.
So first, that's the first time we've said that. I'm just saying things we have found in antiquity.
I did bring up primary and secondary sources.
You said there's a difference between primary and secondary. I'm just talking about I'm talking about ancient documents in total, in things we have found. I said that multiple times. That's all I was talking about.
Right. And that's why I'm saying, which ancient document? Okay, because there's a difference between an ancient document that was a diary entry from, I don't know, some chick who saw Alexander the Great ride by on a horse. There's a difference between that and an ancient document that is recounting the birth weight of Alexander the Great. You see what I'm saying here? There's a different way that these.
And I'm saying that both of them are equally fallible. That is actually my entire point here. You keep on trying to attack so we can like cut away at the point. My point here is
I wasn't at all trying to do that. That's what you think I was doing, and that's what you're attacking, but that's not what I was doing.
I'm not attacking. I'm saying that the reason I keep trying to change it and say pick
what you were saying. Like I was just
and
confused.
I'll say it for the 17th time. None of it matters. All of it is, as long as a human hand was the one writing it down, then it's equally fallible. And that is not to say false. That is not to say untrue. It's to say fallible.
I'm going to push back on the idea that it was equally fallible. That's absolutely not true. It's not equally fallible. It does have a level of fallibility. I'm not saying that anything that a human being writes down is perfect. It's not 100% perfect, but it's not.
I didn't say equally false.
You said equally fallible, but that's also not true because it really depends. It depends on who's writing it, why they're writing it, where they're writing it, when they're writing it. Like there's a whole bunch more that goes into it. And this is where
just so we're clear, the definition of fallible I'm using is capable of making mistakes. That's the word. I'm not saying that a historian monk in the 1400s was equally crazy as a guy like in the street. Yeah, I'm saying capable of making mistakes.
Right. I'm not saying the fallible part. I'm saying the equally part. It goes back to what Hugh said. Nothing is free from bias or error, but it's a disservice to the argument not to acknowledge that the trustworthiness of documents varies, and some are more trustworthy than others.
I agree with that. That doesn't change. This is where I'm fascinated. I think that
exactly that doesn't. They're not equally fallible, but both are fallible. That's exactly what I'm saying, Hugh. Thank you. They're not equally.
You're going to need to make that make way more sense.
Okay, so they're not equally fallible, but they are still both fallible.
So how is any one person less capable of making mistakes than another person?
Well, it depends. If I were to write let's say that Stephen Hawking and I decide to sit down and write a book about science, about like the God, or not God, but the universe and everything.
Yeah,
I'm going to be far more likely to be fallible or failed or whatever in my interpretation.
So you are conflating fallible and incorrect. Are far more likely to be incorrect.
I'm saying I have a far more likelihood of getting it wrong on accident. Like fallible is reread the definition of fallible.
Capable of making mistakes.
Right. I'm going to be far more capable of making a mistake in an area that I'm not an expert in. I'm going to be far more.
So, okay. I see what you, okay. I will maintain that you are using that, you're using that definition. And again, credible is not the opposite of fallible. I am just saying that Stephen Hawking is capable of making mistakes. You are capable of making mistakes. There is absolutely authority. There's absolutely credibility. There's absolutely a lot of these. I'm fascinated. I don't consider those things and opposites of each other. But if that wording makes it easier, that's fine. Yes, they're all fallible. I would say they are all equally capable of containing fallacies.
Right. Humans are flawed. Humans are fallible. But I would not even go as far as to say that they're equally likely. They're not equally likely or equally whatever. Like, I wouldn't say it's the equally part, because what you're basically saying, what I'm hearing, and I don't mean to create a false dichotomy, but what I'm hearing, and obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're saying it doesn't really matter who writes it. It's equally able to be fallible.
And I would maintain that there's a lot of truth. If it's written by the royal historian, I mean, here's a really bad example, and it's meant to be a funny joke, but it's not. In this, might not be the right tenor of this. The least accurate biography of Charlie Chaplin's life was his autobiography. Says every historian. The least accurate one is the one that he wrote as being true. You're like, well, it's his story. How could it be wrong? Because he was a comedian.
Can we bring Jen's thing up?
Maggie, you're arguing from the perspective that context matters, while Kirk is making the argument that we don't have that context. Love you, Jen. Thank you.
Okay, Jen, I'm aware. I'm actually arguing against Kirk that we don't have the context. So the idea that we don't have the context, and I'm not saying that we absolutely do, but I'm saying that this idea that we have no context is also.
I never said no context. Don't. I'm
we
saying
don't
that
have that context.
I
Disagree. The argument that we don't have that context.
we don't. But I'm just listen. I'm going to go to I'm going to go to obvious, crazy. If I look at something in any modern document, I won't pick one because that seems to always send us. If I look at any modern document in 5 minutes of Googling, I can usually find who wrote it and the context in which they wrote it, whether it was an op-ed, whether it was a white paper, in modern era, I can ascertain context pretty definitively, pretty fast. To say that there is any capability to do that with any degree of accuracy more than 100 years ago would be insane. We don't have the proper Isaac Newton that was in the Royal Society where they wrote everything frickin' down. We can't even ascertain the same level of context that recent in history. Once we start getting before Common Era or before, to say that we know the context with any degree of likeness, that's not a word. Well, it is, just not the one I mean, to modern era is not fair. And that's my point, is that you're saying, I'm not saying we have no context. I'm saying we don't have the context. We don't have enough context. And even the context we do have is fallible because it's changed a lot somewhat recently. I never said we don't have context. I'm saying that the context has changed in my lifetime on Egyptology. I will say that when I did my whole chapter on the invention of the wheel, I found all-out fights by doctoral students of where the wheel originated because it has changed in the last 50 years.
Well, no, it's not because it's changed. That's the reason it's changed, because the debate is ongoing and the debate will forever be ongoing. See, everything that you just said, I already knew that you said, this is nothing new, and I still disagree. I think that really
you're saying that I can figure out a modern piece, the modern piece of context is equal.
I'm saying that's where your problem is, the equal part.
But you're saying equal now.
No, I'm saying that's where your problem is, the equal part, that it isn't equal or it is equal. It's apples and oranges. We don't read historical documents the same way we read a newspaper, which is exactly my point to begin with. We don't read it, and we don't look for that modern context that you're talking about. We don't look for any context in a similar way in historical documents when we read them. That's what I'm saying. Apples and oranges. That's why your argument doesn't make any sense.
I was about to say, you're acting like you're the only historian I've talked to, though. That's the part that's getting me.
I'm not a historian
right,
at all.
But I've talked to PhD historians in writing these arguments for this. This isn't like Kirk the crazy storyteller's opinion here. I cite my sources. I talked to lots and lots of people.
And this is, again, where I'm kind of confused as to where you keep talking about how it's in the book. What is in the book? This exact conversation we're having, I don't know. Apples and oranges, yes. And then it's because your general argument is too general and you're wrong when you get specific. That's exactly it. And what Hugh said, primary, secondary, and third party accounts are different levels of fallible. Exactly. That's exactly it, Hugh. Thank you.
Which, for the record, I said that. I was saying that's the whole thing, is that you have the archaeologist who made the point, his student who made the point. So now we're talking third and fourth. There's a lot of, my point is that the exact same fallacies you're saying and the same I'm saying are present in what you're saying. They're just as evident. I recognize that my general statements are general. I do get that. And I make that comment. I also know that no general statement can stand up to general statements are never true, ever. Blanket statements are never true, to include that one.
Yeah, but that's not even I think that a big part of what's happening here is a confusion over what I'm actually saying.
I would agree.
I'm not agreeing with you about the conclusion you made. I agree about fallibility, just not equal fallibility. I agree completely with you about fallibility, completely.
Okay.
My issue is again, going right back to it. It was the comparison of historic documents.
I've changed that and recanted that every 5 minutes since I said it.
But the changing and recanting it is still wrong because you're still doing the same thing. You're
Okay.
still comparing apples to oranges. That was the core of my issue. Again, not a problem with the conclusion you were making. I was just sort of like, wait, like confused about the way you were making it. And you seem to have taken that, or at least you did previously, to mean that I was disagreeing with your conclusion. I wasn't. And you keep bringing up the historians that you talked to about, I don't know what, in your book. I'm not disagreeing that these things are fallible. I'm not disagreeing at all. I'm saying that you're trying to compare apples and oranges, that you're trying to use the same measurement that we use for modern stuff, the way that you're trying to say that we use it for ancient shit, and we don't. We don't. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's apples and oranges.
And I wouldn't say that I ever made that assertion. So I'm either misunderstanding now or I misunderstood then. I will still say that people seem, and I get passive voice and general statement, there are a lot of people that put a lot of weight on things from antiquity that they don't put on things in modernity, which is a fun word as well. And that is a cognitive dichotomy that is documented.
Yes, and I know
that was my point from the very beginning, is that people put more weight on history than they do on current, which is weird because your grandma was just as much a person as you are. That was the crux of the point from the very beginning, is that people do weigh history, maybe not historians, which again, I don't agree with that statement, but people put a lot of weight on the things they find from history more than they do on the things from contemporary times. And I do mean the people at large. I do mean the masses. Back to your whole thing of why.
Yeah, so there's definitely a level of pasturbation, which is, by the way, my favorite word, and I use it all the time. Pasturbation is I think what you're trying to get at. And I don't disagree, obviously. I mean, I complain about pasturbation all the time. But again, that you made the point really badly. Like, I'm not disagreeing with your point. I'm just saying you
attacked it really fast before I had a chance to.
I didn't.
For the record.
Well, I was actually trying to ask you for clarification, but you kept interrupting. So that's why I just finally just spilled it all out there, because you kept interrupting me.
Okay.
But yeah, like, I wasn't disagreeing with your point. I was more confused on what you were trying to say. Like, I was just going to ask, like, define historical document. Like, what do you mean here? Like, that's where my confusion was coming in. But
I mean, I think we're past, like I said, I've done that several times at this point. I think we're just talking in circles at this.
Right. Again, I completely agree. Historians use other disciplines to give context to the documents they study. As those disciplines advance, so does history. That doesn't negate the context we have. It fine-tunes our understanding. Right. And
this
is one of my issues with this idea that, it changed. It didn't change. No. It absolutely changed. We understand in history, there is the understanding that this stuff is fluid.
Right.
There's not this understanding that this is written in stone. This is how it is. Oh, we better get rid of that stone and rewrite it in a new stone. There is that understanding that these things are fluid.
In academia, yes, 100%.
Right. And I guess I don't quite understand bringing it back to the beginning. I don't quite understand where it is or how it is that people pick and choose what isn't written in stone, what is, okay. So for example, here's my notes.
Sure.
I said, crap. There seems to be absolutely no pattern here. We glorify some for X and ignore or even villainize those who do the same thing.
Exactly.
We villainize people for Y and make excuses or ignore others who do the same thing. Really, it comes down to convenience. It really does come down to convenience. I mean, it's the same with like, oh, we changed that. No, we didn't. We didn't change that historically. Or no, this is the way people interpret history. Not really. But like, that's the whole thing. We do this and there's no actual pattern. So again, getting back
you have lost me, by the way. I'm really trying to follow. I don't know that I'm following your thread. I don't.
Where did I lose you? Because you're saying yes. So
I'm nodding. Yeah, I don't. You're saying that things aren't changing that are, or like, that's right. Like, start over. I don't quite understand your point. You're saying that things aren't changing, that the understanding isn't changing.
No, I'm not saying that the understanding.
Because you said it is and it is. So I'm just trying to.
I'm saying that the history isn't changing. So people, okay, for example, when you get, and you're going to love this because it talks about, everyday people.
Sure.
When you get a dad or whatever who's like, Pluto was a planet when I was a kid.
Yes. You could. Yes, I see where you're going.
It was never a planet.
So, okay.
It was classified as such.
Okay. See, that is where we're going to disagree. Not on Pluto. I don't give a damn. Like this is not I will take you to the mat, damn it, Maggie. Pluto is no, I don't
give a shit about Pluto either.
I don't give a shit about Pluto. That's what, but I'm saying that changing a definition, it's a Schrodinger's cat situation. It's a right. If you change the definition, that does mean that, hey, Pluto was never a planet. We used to think it was. Now we realize it never was. So I both 100% agree with you that means that it was never a planet. Mm-hmm. At the exact same time, both people are correct at the same time.
Right.
And that in a lot of ways, I'm not trying to like shoehorn that in a lot of ways is actually kind of what I'm trying to say is that there were scientists with large degrees on their wall, scientists that said Pluto was a planet. They were wrong. They were fallible. And in many ways, they were equally fallible to other people. They made mistakes. Definitions changed. Understandings expanded. There were fallacies and So both, yes, I agree with you. Pluto was never a planet, which, that's sad. At the same time, there were people that were the best and brightest minds of their time that 50 years ago would have said, what are you talking about? Don't be crazy.
Okay, I do agree with what you're saying. But I do have to point out that it is debatable whether or not they were fallible or whether the data was fallible. That's all I'm saying. I
don't agree with that statement. I mean, in the case of Pluto, it's not that we found out Pluto was smaller than we thought it was. We just changed what we defined as a planet. The data didn't change. The data wasn't fallible. We knew how Pluto didn't get smaller. We just changed the class. We changed the definition and said, you used to be tall, have to be this tall to ride this ride. Yeah, you now need to be
But we definitely changed it based on something. We didn't just wake up one day and say, you know what? No.
And I can even tell you what that was.
Okay, go ahead.
It's space junk. It's like basically they said I'm dead serious. I actually talked to my daughter's an astronomy nerd, and we went to a astronomy thing here at NASA, and we were talking to them about how basically we realized that there is so much trash orbiting the sun that we had to draw a line of what was going to be considered, our comets planets? No. Our meteors planets? No. Our big chunks like we had to define something, and based on, this is where I lose it because I'm not smart enough and my eyes glazed over, but basically based on all of the things and, by the elimination criteria of things that you had used to eliminate what could be a planet, it ended up eliminating Pluto because there's so much crap orbiting the sun that it's not fair to call anything orbiting the sun a planet, because then we'd have planets that were this big, and that's just not fair. So they started using elimination criteria. Okay, so comets don't count, and these don't count, and as they started building the elimination criteria, it ended up eliminating Pluto, which is sort of fascinating. But
yeah, I don't give a crap about Pluto enough to have a really strong opinion on this either way. And two, I'm going to trust you because you obviously know more, and this is more of your wheelhouse, and therefore
astronomy is just like I said. I just ask a lot of, but it's just the definitions changed, and with definitions, understandings changed, and I'm saying that that's a good thing.
I'm saying it's a good thing too. Actually, this is what's the point I was trying to make, which is that these things are fluid. A lot of things are more fluid than we think they are. We actually see this with COVID, how people think things are written in stone that are absolutely not written in stone. COVID is one of those areas that drives me insane, where people are like, well, they told us not to wear masks at first, and now they're telling us to wear masks. Okay. COVID is a novel virus. Do we need a lesson on what novel means in this context?
Right.
We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
We're throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks. We are trying to learn as we go here, people.
Know your facts. Yeah. No,
this is, and it's the same with history, and it's the same with science, and it's the same with a bunch of shit that I agree. But people tend to think that, well, a historian said this, and therefore that. No, That's not how it works. A scientist said this and there. No, that's not how it works. It's not how it ever worked, and it's not how it ever will work. But we don't teach that.
Sure.
We instead teach, again, going back to our last conversation, we instead teach people how to fall in line.
Yeah. We teach people the system. We don't teach people how to think.
We teach people how to overly generalize.
Sure.
We teach people how to just whatever. But yeah.
Hold on. Where the wheel was originally invented will never change. It's a fact. Our understanding of it will. When you generalize it, it sounds like the history changed instead of our understanding. I would agree with that. The fights I've read are where it was. I agree. The wheel was invented somewhere. We just don't definitively know where that was. We have lots of great theories based on lots of great information. And the prevailing understanding of that context does and has changed because the argument is ongoing. I'm not saying that the history of where it came from is a fact. Our understanding of that fact changed. And that I misspoke, I believe that. And I mean, that no problems believing that.
I mean, yeah, you were confusing me. You were confusing a lot of people.
I fully believe that I said something incorrectly or used a bad example, and it tumbled out of control from there.
Well, I think another problem was that, like, I was not confused about the things that you thought I was confused about. So then you were coming at me for those things, and I was like, and by coming at me, I don't mean like rudely or anything. I just mean coming at me. And
and you kept bringing up a thing that I had recanted,
and then I was trying to bring the other thing. It was very confusing. It was very confusing. Like
I would agree. I would say that I felt like you kept bringing up something that I recanted as being a disqualifier of the thing that I was of the point I was trying to make.
The problem with the fact that you recanted it was that you replaced it with equally flawed things.
No, I recanted all of it. I said pick the thing that makes the most sense.
But that's I couldn't pick the thing that made the most sense because I had no idea what you were trying to say. Like I understood.
I was saying that people are people at any point in history, and I'm going to stick with equally. I know you disagree, and I'm fine with you disagreeing. But people throughout history have different degrees of credibility, but equal degrees of fallibility. Credibility and fallibility are not opposites.
I didn't say they were.
I know.
I just did.
What's that? No, you have said that you have less fallibility, more fallibility than Stephen Hawking. No, you don't. Period. I disagree with you wholeheartedly, and I'll fight this to the mat. You don't.
In general, no. On science, absolutely. Oh, sorry.
Again, and I didn't say that. So you're again. I said that all people are equally fallible, and you're the one who attacked that. No, all people are equally fallible. They're equally. That's all I said. You're the one who put the on science. I didn't.
Yeah, but
no, I said that all people are equally fallible, and you and Hugh are like, no, they're not. No, they're not.
Because you didn't just say all people are equally fallible. You said that all people are equally fallible, and therefore, and then you brought up history and you brought up all this stuff, and it's like,
I stand by it.
It's not necessarily. That's what I'm saying.
Again, and I would. You don't have to agree with me. That's the whole point of the book, is that people disagreeing with me, I love.
I mean, same.
I mean, the whole book is about how I've been told I was wrong my whole life, and almost all on more often than not, I stuck to my guns and ended up being right.
Well, and here's the thing too. Kirk will always know more success than me. And it's not just because he's a cishet white man. It's because probably because he's a cishet white man, but that's a whole other debate.
That's a whole different conversation.
Kirk is willing to be wrong and to double down on being wrong, and I'm not.
And the thing is that I am, and here's the thing. I am super willing. In fact, I love changing my thing, and don't see perception wrong is going to be what kills you. Because I will say, and please check the tape, there are times that you hung to your perception and your perception was incorrect. But that's fine.
But the thing is, and
I'm not saying my perception is correct.
No, I'm not saying that your perspective is correct. I'm saying that you kept arguing over me before I could actually even share what my perspective was. You were assuming my perspective, which was clear in the way that you said that I thought that these things were sacred. You asked, what is so sacred about these things? Not what I said, not even where I was coming from at all. You also said that I was triggered by what you brought up, which wasn't the case at all. But
then we need to define triggered, because you were something that's the word I'm using to define it.
Confused AF. Confused AF by the point you were trying to make.
Okay.
But I think that you got incredibly guarded about the point you were trying to make and made assumptions about why I was questioning it. I wasn't questioning the point. I was confused.
I think,
But
and again, and that was confusing because I really kept trying to recant the thing you seemed to be confused about. And then I replaced it and you didn't like that. So I said, look, none of these things matter. I'm just saying that all history is subject to our understanding.
yeah, but you got to understand that when you say something is ridiculous and loaded as me saying that something was sacred and I was triggered by you coming at it, that I'm gonna push back on that, Kirk. You think I'm just gonna
you've been
lying down?
No, but I mean, it was also I stand by it. Go watch the tape.
I don't need to watch the tape. I was sitting right here and I know what I felt. I didn't care about it. Wasn't the sacredness of the document, and I sure as shit wasn't triggered. I was just confused.
Okay. Again, and now we're having an interesting, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a perception conversation. You had the exact same perception of the other one, the exact same, but your perception of how I was attacking you is somehow different than my perception of you attacking me.
You know, and the thing is, I don't actually see it as an attack. I just saw it as you. I saw it as you misunderstanding my reaction. And so I wasn't thinking that you were attacking me as much as I was thinking that you were getting defensive of your position. And that's where I was like more confused, but also like trying to answer that while also answering the initial thing. It was a whole thing.
And my point is that, yeah, okay.
I mean, do you still think I was thinking that these were sacred? And that's why I was.
No, again, I picked a word and if you, fourth time you've brought up sacred, that to me is triggered. Maybe I'm defining the word differently than you, and that's fine. But the fact that word, that you're hung up on that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally hung up on the sacred thing. I'm totally hung up on the sacred thing.
Okay,
because
then
that in itself shows that you misunderstood my reaction and that you didn't understand what I was going to say. So, because like the reason I keep bringing up the sacred thing was because that was the moment that I was like, oh no, he totally misunderstood what I said. Then in the next sentence, you said triggered, which I was like, again, with the sacred and the triggered and that language, he clearly misunderstood what I was thinking and misunderstood my reaction and is now going after this thing that I wasn't even thinking.
And so this is fascinating at this point to me, just because, again, the exact same thing had happened to the paragraph before when you jumped on the Wall Street Journal and you jumped on the thing and I kept trying to recant it and change. I was like, okay, she doesn't understand what I'm trying to say. And I kept trying to change it and you wouldn't let me. And I kept trying to change it and you wouldn't let me. And I kept changing it and you kept bringing it back up. And I was like, okay, wow, why are you so hung up on this?
Right. Because I couldn't understand what you were saying. That's why I was hung up and I was asking you to clarify what you were saying.
So I was removing it. I was saying, so we're not talking about it.
Removing it didn't help because you were replacing it with things that didn't make sense.
I said replace it with
thing, right? And replace it with whatever. And I'm like, how am I supposed to replace it with whatever? I don't understand what you were saying. It's kind of like you're saying, here, make this dip.
You were listening for because, and this is what's so important is that I kept trying to make it about this, and you wanted to talk about the thing that I was trying to eliminate. That wasn't my point. And so we focused on the thing that wasn't my point at all.
No, I understand that. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is that I was confused. I was asking you for clarification. I wasn't thinking that whatever. I was like I was legitimately confused and asking you for clarification. And then you kept saying, well, this, and then this, and then it just kept confusing me more because it didn't make any sense. And then you're like, thing. And I'm like, but how am I supposed, you're like, replace it with what you want. How am I supposed to replace it with, I don't know what this is. It's kind of like you gave me a recipe written in Greek. And I'm like, I don't understand this. And you're like, well, here, I'll give you this. And then you gave me a recipe written in freaking ancient Latin. And I'm like, no, I don't understand this. And you're like, fine, just make it the way you want. I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be making. I don't know what this is.
That's a really good analogy. I apologize for that level of confusion. I will say that as I was trying to explain, I was saying like, well, forget the recipe. I want to talk about this other thing. You're like, no, I want to talk about the recipe. I was like, the recipe super doesn't matter. I'm trying to make a point over here. Like, no, I want to talk about the recipe. I was like, we can have whatever recipe you want. Can we talk about the thing I'm trying to talk about now?
Okay, but that's not the way that I was seeing it. I was seeing that you were trying to get me to make something and I had no idea what I was supposed to be making.
And I appreciate that. Like, and again, I will I am delighted when I am wrong. And people seem to think that I like, Kirk has to be right. Kirk loves being wrong. He loves talking about himself in the third person because that's creepy. I love finding out when I'm wrong. And I love having my perception altered. And I don't just mean through hallucinogens. I mean, perceptions, like expanding perceptions and changing worldviews is important. And the thing is that people aren't willing to do it. They will fight to the death, literally, to defend their worldview. And we have got to get over that.
I completely agree on all accounts. But you left me like you were in a boat and I fell off the side and then you just left. And I was like,
and again, I man overboard. So I want everyone, the 7 viewers we have that have been watching this. I love you to death. And none of it has like, I am not in any way upset, angry, or like F Maggie, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't want anyone to like, man, they got into this huge fight. I hope that I have not in any way like I hope we're still good. Because the reason you are the person that I want to have these conversations with is that you are one of the few people I know that will attack my perceptions and not get pissed off when I like respond to that.
And not back down.
Because that's important. It's important. It is so important that we are willing to alter our worldview. It just is. We have got to have a more liquid worldview. We have got to be willing to say, not just I was wrong. Maybe my fact wasn't wrong, but the wall I hung it on wasn't even there. Like my painting, correct. The wall it's on, that wall's not there. We've got to be willing to do that. And again, in a remarkably feeble attempt to tie it back to the point of this week of Credit Misfiled, is today's conversation was in a large part a remarkably good object lesson on what we're talking about, is people assigning weight to things unevenly, disproportionately, and we end up giving credit where it isn't due, or credit where it makes the most sense, and not necessarily where it belongs.
Real quick, though, I know that was a really great, like...
Oh, no, we can keep going. I just wanted to kind of...
I'm going to keep going. I just want to also make sure that people know that I'm not crying. This is
oh my gosh. That would...
I would imagine, though, Kirk, could you...
Oh my gosh!
Kirk McMaggie cry!
I am going to have nightmares tonight about, like, did you hear the Kirk McMaggie cry? Like, I would have, like, a dead rat stabbed to my door in the morning. Like,
yeah.
Like, no...
Yeah. What just happened? I just lost everything. This was the worst timing ever. What the hell? Oh my gosh. Wait, or am I still alive and Kirk's the one that's frozen? I am going to laugh so hard if I'm sitting here talking to myself and I'm the one that's on camera. I'm going to text Kirk. Kirk is frozen. It's me that's still here. Okay. Oh my gosh. And he got booted completely and it's just me. I'm going to use the crap out of this. Any questions, comments, concerns? Anyone? If that wasn't like from the gods themselves that made this happen. This is amazing. So, okay, I do want to say this real quick. I know Kirk well enough to know that what comes off as hostile or what comes off as hostile or mansplaining to a lot of people, because I definitely saw areas where it came off as a lot of different things, what Kirk was doing and the way that he was pushing back. But I know Kirk well enough to know that that's not what he was doing. Kirk just gets incredibly passionate about what he's talking about. And to a lot of people, that's going to come off as really brash. That's going to come off as really mean. And that's not what he was doing. He wasn't being sexist. He wasn't being mansplaining. He was just being Kirk, passionate about what he was saying, passionate about what he wanted to get across. And that's why I'm not taking it up the butt. I'm not sad. I'm not really crying. I'm not whatever. I understood I understood that was Kirk.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Cool.
So for people who maybe watched that and felt that he was being XYZ,
no, I'm just an asshole in general. Yeah.
He is just an asshole in general. I don't think it was whatever. I am not butthurt. I handle assholes really well.
Yeah. Again, I to anyone who, and I came in for the last second of that, so I think I know what was said, but other to say, yeah, no, I don't want anyone to think that I was in any way trying to be attacky or mansplaining or diminutive. I attack misunderstandings because I get really, I want to understand other people badly. I very much want to understand other people's perspectives.
And I can understand you too. So I guess I said, and I can understand that too. Yeah. So I guess that we're good.
So we're good. Next week is chapter 6. This week was Credit Misfiled. Next week, I think, is the last chapter of part 1. Yes, where we talk about Egyptology and the grand circle. So it will actually feed into this week's really well. We're talking next week about how the wall of Facebook and the wall in Egypt, the walls in Egypt are games. Okay, a little better than that. Hold on. I want to see what Jen says. Well, I don't know Kirk well. I know you well enough to know that if that's what he was doing, you would have reacted differently. No, and again, I knew that I wanted to have a series talking about the book, and I knew I wanted to go against is not the appropriate, that I wanted to discuss it with someone who would absolutely not be afraid to tell me you're an idiot here, and that I wouldn't be offended when they did. So like that, I think we are a good match in this, and I really appreciate the ongoing conversation.
For now, anyway.
Sure, I can hate you tomorrow, but today we're good. I do love you, Maggie.
Oh, hey, Catherine. I know I was talking you up, Kirk.
Oh, hey, Catherine. So, we are, I think that concludes this week. This was a fiery one. This is going to be a fun thing to watch.
Yeah, watch it over and see how wrong you were.
I don't have to. But I mean, I will, because I am obsessive and will, but I would encourage you to do the same, because same. Awesome. Thank you. No, don't look at the same. Thank you all, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.